Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and today I want to talk about one of the most important things that we do each day, and probably most of us are doing things wrong. So, if you want to create a life and career that you truly love, you need to make sure that you are an effective communicator. So today's video is about sharing how to be more effective as a communicator and understanding the principles of communication that build positive relationships. So stay tuned. So some basic learning objectives that we need to consider that I'm going to talk about in this video are what are the basic elements of communication process. And I think the most important skill to have is that we are listening effectively and we're asking the right questions the right way. And it really is important that if we want to build positive relationships, we need to make sure that we're communicating in the most effective way where the receiver of our message truly is understanding us, and that starts with us understanding them. So some of the basics that we use are actually making sure that we're using the right words in the right way. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And then there are channels of communication. Having the right channel for the right person actually matters. And we're always communicating throughout our day. And we may be having things that are communicating things in a negative way about us, like in our social media. And so we have to be able to consider that. And then finally, cultural differences matter. You kind of take for granted, or I know I used to, take for granted that just because people are speaking English to us that they understand. So really recognizing that there's some cultural context things that have to be considered and that we need to make allowances for every person's culture in order for us to be able to exchange information in a meaningful way where people truly are understanding us and we are truly understanding them. So, communication truly must be a two-way process. And essentially, that requires us to do three things, and very often we don't do it very well, and so we're going to talk about that too. Essentially, encoding is really important. We need to be able to translate our thoughts into the right words. And then the receiver needs to be able to interpret the meaning of that received message, and we call that decoding. And then giving feedback is important, and that's the reply back to the message. And so essentially those three parts create effective two-way communication. So let's talk about that process. It's a two-way flow of information. One, the sender encodes the message. Two, the receiver decodes the message, so you're using the right words. Then the sender will encode a reply back to the receiver, and then the receiver then decodes that message. And so it needs to be kind of a cyclical thing where you're clarifying, you're making a statement, you're using the right words with the right inflections and saying things the right way at the right time to the right person, and that means understanding how that person receives information. And I break that down even more in other videos. So there are so often encoding and decoding problems, and this is why miscommunication is very, very expensive. It could cause conflict, and it could cause us to push other people away, when really we need other people to understand us, and we need to understand people so that we understand the right actions to take, because it's our choices and ultimately our decisions that affect outcomes. So that really comes down to communicating and figuring out what communication breakdowns are. So sometimes we just hear noise, and these are sounds that are not related to the message being exchanged. And so we have to get people's undivided attention and be able to make eye contact or be able to communicate in a way where people feel comfortable and they receive the information. You're not always going to have the ideal situation where you're able to exchange information, but really all other outside noises have to be minimized, and you have to have people's undivided attention. That really will help set you up for success for being able to send and receive messages. People want to be able to receive the message properly, and you need to be able to say, hey, it's awfully loud in here. Can I have your undivided attention? Because I really think you're going to find that what I have to share with you is important. Choice of words matters. So if you're going to send a verbal message, you need to do it effectively. So one, make sure you're using short phrases, and then be able to demonstrate strength and force of what it is that you have to share. And do it in a way where you are being graceful and you're providing charm. Avoid using trite words or phrases that sound overeager or off-color language or slang or foul language. If you're in a professional environment, create your brand by being professional all the time. You know, people are always evaluating us for how we present ourselves, so be professional, use professional language, and use communication that values people's time. Draw on a set of words to best help presentation features or product services. You know, one of the things that I remember from the O.J. Simpson trial, and if you've watched that, is if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. So being able to use short phrases that really helps hit the point home is really important. And so make sure that you have words that are common with that person. Sometimes using culture-specific words truly helps. How you say things matters, and that means rate of speech matters. So make sure that you're slowing down if you've got more difficult topics that need to be considered. How loud you say things matter. Make sure that you're customizing how loud you say things for the particular situation. Inflecting on things with the right tone and pitch matters, and how you articulate things matters. One of my favorite videos of one of the best salespeople of all time is Zig Ziglar, and you probably find it here on YouTube. Is he uses the statement, he didn't say he stole the money, or I didn't say he stole the money. So think about those specific words. I did not say he stole the money. She said it. I did not say she stole the money. I did not say she stole the money. I did not say she stole the money. I implied it. She did not say, I did not say she stole the money. He did it. I did not say she stole the money. I was implying that he borrowed it. I did not say she stole the money. You know, and so she stole a computer instead. So there's a lot of different ways that how we articulate things is how people will receive things. What we know works really good is that stories very often help people visualize in their minds what's going on. And so stories with conflicts, trials, and crisis, if you could create stories for everything that every message that you're trying to send that helps people really think through that their choices and outcomes of their decisions, you could be more effective. You know, create word pictures. This is really a great skill to develop. And then have analogies where you're drawing a parallel between one thing or another, and then making sure that you are keeping lines of communication opening. So practice the 80-20 rule of active listening. 80% of the time you should be listening, and you should only be talking about 20% of the time. I'm going to say that again. Listen 80% of the time, talk 20% of the time. And Dr. Stephen Covey, one of my favorite authors of all time, essentially tells us that it takes about 90 or more % of the time to fix problems of miscommunication than it does to actually communicate. And he or she who is listening actually does more work than the person that's talking. And so it's important to do the work of active listening. So effective communication really takes doing more listening. And if you have both people listening more than they're talking, then they can process information. And then you have to consider the rate, that listening differential that we have. People need time to process information, and that really is important. We all process things differently. So are we hearing things? Are we passive listening to things, or are we active listening to things? And so if we really want to be effective, we need to make sure that we're doing as much active listening as possible, and not just hearing the words, but really focusing on the communication, because with communication, fast is slow and slow is fast. Consider that. Slow communication means that you're really getting information across and people are understanding you. Fast communication means that you're saying the words but people aren't taking time to process it. So you've got to say things the right way to people in order for them to draw the right conclusions. So when you are actively listening, you need to do the same thing. You need to really be thinking about what the person, the speaker, is talking about, evaluate the evidence that's before you, and then sort out the facts that matter, the important facts, from the irrelevant facts. And then draw as much information as possible so that you can make the right information. And you can help your brain in creating active learning situations. So one way to do that is by repeating the information. You just said this. Did I get that right? Or restate the information, but rephrase it in your own word. I want to repeat this in my own words just to make sure that I heard what you're saying. You say this. Paraphrasing is important. And then 3, clarify the information. So, just to get this right, you said this, this, and this. Did I get that right? So, repeat the information, restate and rephrase the information, and then clarify the information. Did you mean this, or did you mean this? So, at the end, if you really want to practice active listening, and I think it's the best skill that any leader can have, really, is practicing active listening. So if you want to be an effective leader, you've got to be an effective listener. Number 1 skill, communication, effective communication for effective leaders. And you can grow your career by being an effective listener. So at the end of every conversation, summarize the conversation, just to give a quick review. Tolerate silences among people. Sometimes people need time to think, so allow that time. Respect people's time. Don't say anything condescending. Just allow time for people to think. And then really concentrate on the ideas that are being communicated. Don't get distracted by anything. Make time to really process the information. All right, so let's talk about nonverbal. Body language probably is the most important out of everything related to communication. We are always communicating with other people through our body language, and we call that nonverbal communication. So be aware of body language, space, and your appearance, how you dress, how you take care of yourself. All of these things matter. If you're in a job interview, make sure you're dressing the right way, you're giving undivided attention, and you're showing that you're serious and you're processing the questions and you're answering the questions in a right way. So, things to consider for nonverbal communication, and you could observe these things from other people. How is their body situated? Do they feel uncomfortable? Or are they focus straight on you? What does their face look like? Do you recognize the emotion that's going on as a person is processing things? Or how are their arms? Are they closed off or are they open? And how are your hands? Are they communicating in an open, free way, or does it show that they're nervous or that they're trying to hide something? And your legs too probably should be open in a way where you don't feel like you're communicating that you're not open to receiving the information, or maybe the person that you're talking to isn't open to receiving information. Positive signals of communication: uncrossed arms and legs, leaning forward, smiling is probably one of the most important things we can do, nodding at the right time, showing that we're listening and we're following along. Are we being contemplative? Are we really processing information? And of course, you should be thinking about these things about the person that you're communicating. Is there efficient eye contact where people know that you have their attention and you can see that they're processing the information and considering what it is? And are people being animated and excited about what you have to say? So, same thing is the opposite. Negative reactions that you should be aware of are crossed arms and legs, leaning backward or turning away from you, furrowed brow, pursed lips, frowning, shaking your head, fidgeting. Are people uncomfortable? Is there no eye contact? Are they even paying attention? Are they lifeless? So body language is so important, and you need to be evaluating body language. And you might even say things like, you look like you're uncomfortable, or it looks like this isn't interesting to you, or let me rephrase that another way, because it looks like that made you feel uncomfortable, or that you didn't understand it. So being assertive in being able to recognize body language is important. So it says a lot about people's true feelings if you could just accurately analyze the body language of other people. And you need to be aware of your body language as you're communicating, because sometimes you may be giving contradictory nonverbal signals as it relates to what you're saying verbally. So make sure you are in alignment with your body language. Be aware of your facial muscles. Sometimes you have involuntary reactions. I had someone tell me they were watching me in a presentation, or someone else's presentation, and they could see that I had some twitching going on. That was surprising. I've never heard that before. Be aware of your eye contact. It says where your attention is going. Your gestures and handshaking matter, and your body language. Are you standing upright, tall? Are you giving eye contact to everybody that's involved? And when you're communicating with people on a more intimate level, be aware of distance zones. Each of us have different zones that we need to be aware of. There's an intimate zone for close personal relationships. There's personal zones for close friends that share special interests. There's social zones. We'll talk about that bubble. And then there are public zones. How far away does that look like, or should that be? So you could look at any of these things and be aware of how you are communicating with other people, and that distance matters. So create closer situations by slowly getting closer to people. Kind of feel out where people's comfort is. Don't reach out and touch somebody if they appear to move away, but that's a good sign that you need to build trust in that relationship. So how you dress really does matter. You've got to make sure that you're wearing the appropriate attire and that you're grooming in a professional way. How you dress and how you perceive can leave the most important first impression. Are you being graceful? Are you giving off an air of confidence? Not too confident, but confident so they can be confident in you. The most important thing that you could do is be able to have an appearance that creates an environment where people notice you in a positive way and they build trust with you. So, other things to consider. I wear suits, and if I wear suits with a sweater and it's in the midsummer and it's hot, that probably is not going to be, they'll make them feel uncomfortable, and you will be uncomfortable. So you need to make sure that you are considering the geography and when you dress, temperature and what the local norms are. Consider the appearance of the person that you're talking with? Are you congruent with the way that they dress? If you're in an interview or you want to do business with an organization, what is the corporate culture, the norms for that particular industry, and what are your aspirations? You should always be dressing above, the position that you want to interview for. And be aware of the fact that you want to build a halo effect. You've got to be reasonable, but you want to create that first impression where everything you say from there on will be received in a positive way. It's hard to undo the opposite, which is called a horns effect. So create a positive first impression by the way that you poise yourself, the way that you dress, the way that you communicate, then maintain that. I always tell my students, don't screw it up. So create a positive relationship and then don't mess that up. Be aware of how you communicate using technology. Be aware of how much time there is in your communication and when you get a response to it. I think a good rule of thumb is reply back in 24 hours, and it's even better if you can reply back before the end of the day if possible, but make 24 hours an acceptable time for you. Make sure that you decide what you're going to say before you do it. And the same thing goes with communication. Plan out your telephone communications in a way where you'll value the person's time and you're using the right type of communication on the phone. That's a great way to exchange ideas instantaneously. So decide what you're going to say. Be polite, be enthusiastic, truly be an active listener. Practice those face-to-face communication message sending processes that I talked about. Be aware of verbal cues and make sure that you're giving the person that you're talking to an opportunity to good questions and to respond. So communication takes time, especially if you want to be effective. So plan out your calls. Really do more listening than speaking. Really listen to how things are being said. I think it's a good thing to do when you're talking, just to keep your energy up, is to smile when you're talking. You can hear a smile. Let's go back and talk about email communications. It's probably the one way that you can be able to value people's time is to send messages via email, and it's not a perfect system, so you can minimize miscommunication by doing things right. It is the fastest way, but it is not the most intimate way, using email. So value people's time by using meaningful subject lines. John, about your car. Or John, immediate information requested. So help people know what the communication is all about, so they can prioritize your email and get their attention by putting their name in there so they know that it's not spam. Put the information that they need in the first lines. I wanted to talk to you about this specific thing. Here's what you need to know. Be careful about the tone or intent of your email. You don't want to have what you say be misconstrued so that people can take offense to it. Really understand what your reader's preferences are. Don't be overkill with pictures or long email messages or large attachments. You want to make sure the message gets through and that we're valuing people's time. Use speed to impress your customers or whoever it is that you're communicating through. Never communicate bad news through email. Those are best done on a face-to-face basis. And make sure that you're aware of the timing of your email. So the last thing that I want to talk about is social networking. You hear all the time about people who don't get an interview because very often organizations are taking a look at your social networking site. I remember a very famous lawsuit where an airline employee had a picture of herself partying it up with other people, and she was dressed in scantily clothing and holding a drink, and it wasn't the image that the airline company wanted of their employees. And because employees are the face of their organization, they have to kind of be choosy, and they need to often screen what their employees are doing. So keeping a professional face, being aware of in your social media, and be aware that the whole world is using that or can use your social media to be able to assess what kind of person that you are. When you're building your social media, make sure you fill out your profile completely and say things that build and establish trust. Be aware of the things that can create common bonds. Create contact and friend lists. Make sure that you're following the rules of the networking sites. You don't want to get kicked out, and you want to make sure that you're following norms. Those kinds of things help. Make sure that you combine your social media accounts so that people have easy access to be able to contact you and do more research on you. And so even in your emails, have your Facebook and LinkedIn URLs right next to your signature. So just a few rules of using social media. And then I also mentioned cultural differences. So recognize that here in the United States we use words that often have multiple meanings. That can be confusing. Grammar, it really matters, so make sure that you're checking your email and reading it out loud and listening for accuracy, and making sure that you're never using vulgar expressions and that you're using common words, and avoiding slang. Sometimes we say things where people can have double connotations to it, and so, or just unclear of what that means, like in the neck of the wood, your neck of the woods. What does that really mean? Well, that's a common term that we use all the time to say I'm near you, but most of us don't have woods near us. So that could be really confusing. When you talk about neck of the woods, you think of a body part. So English is so confusing. So be as succinct and clear as you can, and keep in mind who it is that you're communicating with. How much eye contact do they need? How much physical contact do they need? How is your body language? Or should you be bowing lower or higher than someone? So cultural differences always have to be considered. You want to honor people on their terms. That's just about being a respectful communicator. Communication is only effective if the person is open to receiving the communication and accurately receives the information, and you've done your homework by preparing the message, and you're thinking about how best to be able to use effective communication so that people can receive and benefit from the information that you have to share. So communication is very complex. If you've practiced communicating wrong, hopefully you'll find the tips that I've shared in this video are useful to help you create a life and a career that you truly love. We're our own brand managers, and we're communicating all the time with our body language, how we say things, and the words that we choose. Be aware of using the right channel of communication and being able to articulate things that are received in a positive way that makes a positive difference. Thank you so much for your valuable time. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Make it a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.